Hey, Larken Rose here. I'm exhausted from chopping up an 80-foot tree that just fell down, but I think I have enough energy to make a video. Incidentally, there's one person that's responsible for me putting out a whole bunch of videos recently, who's been making donations. Not going to say his name, but he knows who he is, and thank you very much to him for doing that. For the rest of you cheapskates, no, I'm just kidding. You're allowed to watch them for free. If you donate, that helps, but you don't have to. Isn't it cool how, voluntary interaction works? Anyway, wanted to do a rant about the concept of self-censorship and how much it feeds into the agenda of megalomaniacs. And it does so in a bunch of subtle ways that you might not notice. There's a lot of people who, they have jobs, or they have a reputation, or they have something or other that they're scared of losing if they say something that offends the wrong people. And it could even be something as simple as, when I'm, with my family, I don't talk about this stuff because it only leads to an argument, so they self-censor. Now, I'm not going to judge people as evil for doing that, because people have to sort of decide for themselves, at what point and in what situations they're going to sort of, smooth things over by not really talking about things that they know are going to cause trouble. But here's the problem. I'm going to describe the problem, and, it's still up to the individual to decide if and when they're going to dare to say what they actually think. But the trouble is, there's a number of factors that make people self-censor and not say what they think. And one of the worst outcomes of that is that adds to the ability of those in power to fake public opinion. They have their media outlets, although the trust in them has been falling apart. But they have their media outlets, and for a really obvious example that's been going on for decades, is if you watch Hollywood and the mainstream media, you'd basically think that everybody who's educated or nice or at all respectable is a total liberal leftist, and conservatives are all greedy, heartless, evil, psychotic bastards. Because media just constantly portrays that. You'll almost never see mainstream Hollywood making a movie where conservatives are the good guys, because they're trying to demonize literally half the country. And that's a really obvious example. And luckily there are a bunch of people who are still they dare to say, yeah, I'm that anyway. I have conservative values. Now, most of that argument back and forth is an argument between different sets of statists. So none of them are on my side, which is kind of unfortunate. But the thing is, it can be in subtle ways, and one of the nastiest ways, ironically, is when they use people's politeness or niceness to trick them into not saying what they really think. And where it's someone's going to be offended. If you express what you actually believe, even if your belief is, there's nothing hateful or nasty about your belief, but somebody somewhere might get offended, so you're not allowed to say that. And the end result is, if nobody's saying that, everyone who's thinking that feels alone. And often they actually think they're alone. I guess I'm the only one who believes that because I don't see anybody else saying it. Meanwhile, they're censoring themselves too and adding to that. And it's weird the amount of power that has. For example, it used to be that in public most people wouldn't just totally mock and make fun of the President of the United States, because you have to respect the office. So people would quietly do it, in private conversations, but don't say that in public. Or if people are critical of the troops, since we're coming up on July 4th, you might be able to quietly criticize, but don't you dare say that in public because people will be offended and yada, yada, yada. And so that's sort of the right-wing statists doing it. And right now the left-wing statists are doing it for everything under the sun. You have to describe people using whatever arbitrary made-up terminology they decide you have to use to describe them, even if it's either completely made up, it's not even a word, or it is an incorrect word. And you're not allowed to have a different opinion, even if it's like polite and you're saying, well, here's why I don't, here's why I see that and here's how I think that is. So many people censor themselves and they expect, a lot of them expect that, well, something will fix it. I'm just not going to be the one to sort of, rile people up by saying what I think when it goes against the grain. The trouble with that is you're just helping insanity and falsehood move forward by not saying what you think. Like assuming if you believe what you think, doesn't mean you're always right. I'm not always right. But if you're saying what you think or not daring to say what you think, then from your perspective, you're helping the lie. Because to remain silent in the face of a lie helps the lie. Like if somebody's, something like, all right, now we're all going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And a lot of people are going, okay, I don't really believe in it. Like I'm a voluntarist. I don't believe in ruling classes and stupid arbitrary distinctions between sets of people that's divide and conquer. But everyone here is going to be offended if I pledge allegiance, yada, yada, yada. And again, I understand why people do that, and I kind of sympathize. So I'm not saying you're evil for doing it, but I am pointing out the real world results of that. And that's a very specific example because the Pledge of Allegiance is a cult ritual. It's insane. It's indoctrination. I did it for many years back when I was a statist and didn't recognize how utterly bonkers it is for a huge group of people to pledge allegiance to a ruling class. Now, I know a bunch of you, it's not about pledging allegiance to a ruling class and to the republic for which it stands. You're pledging allegiance to the republic. That's the ruling class. It's in the pledge. You're saying that you're pledging allegiance to a republic. Not, I pledge to support freedom. Not, I believe in everybody getting along. I believe in diversity. I believe, whatever mush you want to imagine that America is or stands for. What the pledge actually pledges allegiance to is a ruling class and the symbol that ruling class uses to represent itself. And having a huge group of people pledging allegiance to that in any setting is really dang creepy. And for all the people who find it creepy or even just kind of don't want to do it, but are pressured into it by feeling like, well, I'm going to be criticized and other people are going to, they'll be offended and then I'll have to explain, why didn't you... It's a way of continuing the false impression everybody has, including the people who are actually, of the general mindset. Well, we all think it's great to pledge allegiance to a ruling class. Why don't you? You could have been the reason that somebody there had thought, I wonder why somebody wouldn't pledge allegiance. Especially if they know you, it's that person's not, rude or mean or a murderer or something. I wonder why he isn't pledging allegiance. And if they never see anybody doing that, they're never going to wonder that. And if you have the peer pressure and bullying, it's so funny that, the left is we're about tolerance. And their entire agenda for the last 3 years is peer pressure and bullying and censorship. If you have an opinion that doesn't match what we think on any issue, on the trans issue, on the I don't know if you're allowed to say the word anymore, the non-existent pandemic where, there's a cold and we're going to shut down the whole world and pretend that you were all going to die and do just ridiculous crap. And anybody who stands up and says, I'm looking at the numbers, this doesn't make any sense. They're not just going to say, well, here's why we disagree and we'll spell it out. They'll say, you're evil, you want grandma to die, and you're horrible, anti-science, blah, blah. Bully and peer pressure all over the place. That's what the left does. And it's the same thing if somebody says, if somebody is born, they were born male, they look male to me, I call them he, they feel like a she and they want to be identified as she, but I would still describe them as he because I think that word describes the biology of somebody. If somebody has that opinion, that is a perfectly rational opinion, whether you like it or not, whether you think they should be nice and go out of their way to use a different term for the sake of the feelings of the other person, whatever, That opinion is perfectly rational, but nobody's responding to it in a rational way. They're saying, you're horrible and evil and hateful and hurtful and you should be silenced and canceled and yada, yada, yada. Bully, 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 bully. Demonize, silence, censor, gang up on, peer pressure. That's what the left does with everything. And the thing is, when you go along with that, even just remaining silent, you let it look like their opinion is the common one. Like, that's what everybody thinks. If nobody dares to stand up and go, I don't really think that, I don't agree with that about, whatever the topic is, then everybody else can get the impression, well, I guess this is what most people think. And that's the point I wanted to rant about today, because it's really dang important. And the thing is, it's most difficult if you think you're going to be alone. If you're in a crowd and you're like, I'm the only one who's not going to be pledging allegiance here, but I'm just not stinking going to do it. The more alone you are, the more important it is to say what you think and actually have your words and actions match your principles. Because if half the people there are thinking it, well, I mean, that doesn't take much courage, and there's some chances somebody else is going to stand up. If you're the only one, that means you're the only chance in that time and place that those people are going to have any reason to doubt that everybody believes this. We are all on the same page. You're in a place where you can give them a hint, and you can do it nicely. You can even do it sort of subtly and like, I'm not going to stand up and yell about it, just not going to pledge allegiance to the symbol of a ruling class. Not even going to say anything. Just going to sit here and let you guys do it. Not going to bash you for it. But you are the one thing there, like if you're the only one there who thinks that, you're the one opportunity there for truth to nudge forwards a tiny little bit in opposition to insanity. And that's happening all over the place. And it's so sad to watch so many people be literally bullied and shamed and guilt-tripped into not saying what they think. Because it's one thing if like somebody's like really mean and they get shamed into being nice. But this isn't about that. This is people are shamed into lying. Just outright lying, or at least omission where they don't say what they think and they don't say what they believe to be true. And I see a bunch of like little Jordan Peterson exchanges and stuff in my feed every now and then. And I like a ton of what he says. Like, I wish I could sit down with him for 8 hours and take a shot at his belief in statism, because I don't even think it would take that much for him to give that up entirely. But just heard a thing where somebody was asking, like, well, if we're in academia or we're going into some profession, how do you balance the thing of all this political correct stuff? Like, you have to give your diversity statement about some damn thing to get into something that has nothing to do with that. And Jordan Peterson was like, he sits there and thinks about it for a minute, and then he gave this awesome eloquent thing of like, if you get yourself, I'm gonna paraphrase it to death, if you get in the habit of lying, that's kind of what you become. Like, your own words or lack thereof are going to affect you too. You're punishing yourself too. You're doing something to yourself every time you sit there and lie for the sake of your career or not causing trouble or some relationship or something. Every time you lie to appease other people, you're still feeding the lie. And I think it's important for people to remember that. Now, like I said, people have to decide for themselves when they're going to risk stuff. Because it's like, well, this is my job and this is how I feed my family. And I know I don't dare to, like, say what I think on these issues because, maybe I work for a woke dumbass who's going to fire me if I, like, have an opinion that doesn't match the Chairman Biden's position on any given day. And so I understand that, and I'm not saying you're evil if you're doing this. I am saying you're helping evil, because if you remain silent in the face of a lie, you're helping the lie. And sometimes you have to help a lie to avoid death. Like, if there's a firing squad and, roaming through Germany and they say, who here supports the Nazis? Yeah, you might want to go, I do, along with everybody else, so they don't just kill you, because what would it accomplish to just kill you? But sadly, I think people have a really low threshold of just well, I don't really want like a dirty look from somebody or for somebody to disagree with me. Like, if you want the truth to win, you need the threshold a little higher than that. If it's like, I'm going to lose my career and I can't feed my family, okay, I can totally sympathize with that. But if you're going along with a lie and remaining silent in the face of, I mean, there's 8,000 lies happening all over the place just in daily life now in the U.S. about everything you can possibly imagine. If you're remaining silent in the face of that, you're helping all the lies. And yeah, there will be a point at which you're going to help the lie so that you don't become unemployed and homeless. And okay, I understand that. But if you're helping the lie at times when the risk is almost nothing other than, oh, somebody I don't know might think something negative about me. Like, holy crap. If, it used to be that people stood up and told the truth knowing the state was going to kill them for it. It's like, this is still what's true. You can cage me, you can kill me, and I'm still going to... And now it's like, well, we don't dare to say what's true because somebody might be offended. And so I'll end this rant by talking about... There's a thing that came up in the panel discussion up at PortFest where I was talking about, I think people need to decide at what point they're going to basically say, to hell with like reputation and career and all these things that depend on somebody else. I'm all the way going to be loud and consistent about what I believe. Like, I'm in that position. Like, there are, 95% of jobs I can never have. Well, it may not be that high. Because of what I believe and because of what I say. There's a whole lot of places that aren't going to hire me. And a whole lot of employers are like, well, we don't want to be associated with that. And I'm fine with that. Like, they're not obligated to hire me. But I've sort of made the choice all the way over the line of like, I'm going to say what I think and, I'll get lots of people having tantrums at me, and that's fine. There's lots of places I can't work. There's lots of people who won't deal with me, won't hire me, won't do whatever. And that's fine. And there's a lot of people who draw the line somewhere else. Like, well, I have my career and I have to pay my family. So, when it comes to that stuff, I'm not very public about it. And I know a bunch of anarchists who are like that. Like, I can't really afford to be loud and public about this. And I totally sympathize and I understand. And they're also, most of them are doing great stuff sort of behind the scenes rather than sticking their face up and having everybody hate them. Because they're in a position where that's, really doesn't help. As long as you're doing something to push back against the lie, even if it's not right then, even if you're in a room full of nationalists and they're pledging allegiance, even if you go all the way to I pledge allegiance, blah, 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 to make them not criticize you for not partaking in the bizarre cult ritual of just brainwashed insanity, which is what the Pledge of Allegiance is, do something, somewhere, say something about it, even if it's anonymously. Because the power of peer pressure is massive, and the thing is, it doesn't matter whether the effect of the peer pressure doesn't depend on whether it's actually public opinion. It only depends on whether people think it is. And if the left or anybody in the ruling class is pushing the whole look at the emperor's new clothes, and everybody's going, I don't dare to say anything. The peer pressure from non-existent peers is massive. In other words, everybody's looking and going, I don't think he's wearing clothes, but I don't dare to say anything. So it's fake peer pressure. It's fake popular opinion fabricated by those in power. And to do nothing about that is to let people be peer pressured into believing something when their peers don't even believe it. When the majority doesn't even believe it. And now we're seeing backlash on a whole bunch of things where finally a bunch more people dare to stand up and start to criticize things that are just insane and bogus, like, letting somebody who was born a man compete in athletic things against people who were born women. Regardless of what you feel like, that's called cheating. You have an unfair advantage. It's really damn obvious. Don't do that. You're a total jerk for doing that. And finally, and I think at least two of the women who were on these swim things finally came out and started talking about it. And one of the things one of them said was basically, we thought somebody would fix this because we're like, suddenly, what? This can't be okay. Someone's going to do something. Someone's going to... Well, that's my punchline here. you're the someone. You're the someone who has to say something about whatever it is. When you're surrounded by people who believe bullshit and repeat bullshit, you're the one who has to say, that's bullshit. And you don't have to do it in every setting, and you don't have to do it with everyone you know, but somehow, in some way, do it somewhere. Because the lie gets power from people not daring to just say, that's not true, and we don't all think that. So, see if you can make it a habit. Like, sometime in the next week, make yourself a little bit uncomfortable. You don't have to, like, make your family homeless. But make yourself a little bit uncomfortable by being in a setting somewhere where you just politely point out that I don't agree with what, like, all of you are thinking or saying, or what that thing's saying. And it's easy to agree, like, be amongst people who are like you and disagree there. That hardly counts. Politely, gently disagree in a setting where your life's not at stake, but where you know other people are going to go, oh, how could you think that? Let them respond that way. Like, what do you think is more important? Telling the truth or having the approval of people who are lying